Nowadays, especially in the Western Hemisphere, everyone knows about insurance, right? We begin the day perhaps with an insurance, at least a phone call from an insurance company. We need insurance for car, for our health, for our glasses, for our teeth, for our home, for everything there is insurance. So once there were 3 insurance agents having their promotion, their commercial, to making people buy their company's insurance. So the first one was an atheist, one who doesn't believe in God, right? So his commercial was telling people, if you buy my insurance, it will cover you from basket to casket. Okay? Basket to casket. And the second one, an insurance agent, was a Hindu guy. A Hindu practicing guy. Hinduist. His commercial was, if you buy my insurance, it will cover you from womb to tomb. Right? Womb to tomb. From your birth to until the time you go into the grave. And finally, there was a Catholic insurance agent. And his commercial was, if you buy my insurance, it will cover you from conception to the resurrection. Right? He used his faith. He used his faith as a selling idea for his insurance company. Dear brothers and sisters, celebrating the 32nd Sunday in ordinary time, we are only left with 3 more Sundays, 32, 33, and 34, which is actually the solemnity of Christ the King. The liturgical season is coming to an end. It is a time to apply, in the aerospace language, the landing gear. It's the time that we are landing onto the earth, onto the ground, concluding the liturgical year. So, these last 3 Sundays, this weekend, next weekend, and the following weekend, talk about inviting us to look into the future. Today's readings talk about resurrection and what we anticipate as we are faithful to the covenant. The first reading and the gospel talk about the life and what we need to do if we want to be faithful to the life that God has given us through the covenant He made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So let us unpack the readings for us, especially the first reading and the gospel reading. So I'll be going back and forth to enunciate what it actually entails. Notice the first reading. The 7 brothers with their mother were arrested and tortured. And the reason was they were not willing to eat pork, which is an abomination in Jewish tradition. So with the mother, 7 brothers were brought in, being tortured, were forced to eat pork. Now this is a kind of what we call today cultural aggression. One culture trying to impose their cultural traditions or ideas onto another culture. Now the Jewish culture, into which the 7 brothers and their mother are being imposed with the Greek culture, the Hellenistic culture. So the Greek rulers, authorities, are asking these Jewish people to eat pork, which is an unimaginable thing in their Jewish tradition. But notice what the brothers are saying. The first brother, speaking on behalf of everybody, telling, what do you expect to achieve by questioning us? You're not going to change us. We are ready to die rather than transgress the laws of our ancestors, the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Since he spoke that way, they were ready to torture these guys and kill them. So the first one, before he was killed, notice his words. You are depriving us of the present life, but the King of the world will raise us up to live again forever. That's the resurrection. It is for His laws that we are dying. So he already speaks about hope. Notice the second brother. At the time of his death, his words, "It was from heaven that I received these. I disdained them from him. I hope to receive them again." About the laws that they received from God. So they are never compromising anywhere. And the third brother is telling them, "It is my choice to die at the hands of men with the hope God gives of being raised up by him. But for you, there will be no resurrection to life." So all the three brothers, in fact, all seven of them are courageous, are giving witness to their faith, and they were prepared to die. Notice the kind of fidelity, kind of conviction that these three brothers manifested even at the point of death. They all spoke about hope, happiness, and heaven. Though they were being killed, they were happy because they knew they are dying for the Lord, the God who gave them the covenant. But even in their death, they were hopeful. And they were hopeful about resurrection and heaven. Continuing further, these three brothers spoke with such an assurance and gave up their lives because resurrection is the foundation for our faith. It is the foundation on which our faith is actually resting. If Christ was not risen from the dead, we would be the most foolish people in the world, says St. Paul. So today's first reading, as a link to the gospel reading, talks about the hope, the kind of happiness we are supposed to manifest in living our faith, with looking forward to the resurrection and the life in heaven. Now, this is not just what happened to Maccabees, those 7 Maccabbean brothers. This is happening today in the world. In 2015, our Coptic Christian brothers were murdered on the banks of the river. They were made to kneel and their heads were chopped off. And it is said the last word that came out from their mouths before they were killed, Jesus. So they were hopeful, they were convinced, they were happily giving their lives because they believed in the resurrection, that God will raise them up. That God will raise them up. Hope, happiness, heaven. And the gospel reading gives us a more explaining meaning to understand and unpack what is happening in the first reading. First reading, we see a testimony of faith. They were ready to die for their God. They're ready to die than to break the laws that they received from their God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But in the gospel, we see a kind of unbelief. Now, we need to read the gospel through the lens of the Sadducees. Now, the most sad people in the gospel are, anyone knows? The Sadducees, because they are always sad, because for them there is no hope in resurrection. This is a religious political group, Sadducees, who claim to be the descendants of priest called Zadok. They claim to be the descendants of the priestly clan of Zadok. So Jesus is kind of in an argument with this group called Sadducees. So this group of guys, they never believed, they never considered the oral traditions that are passed on. So for them, no belief in resurrection, no belief in angels, and there is no believing at all in heaven. So they are coming to Jesus with this famous contesting question. Whose wife will she be? And Jesus talks to them. Men of this age, people of this age, marry and remarry. Actually, Jesus is engaging a traditional Jewish method of argument. In answering them, right? Jesus is engaging a traditional Jewish method of argument. What is that? Jesus says, towards the end of the gospel, the dead will rise. Even Moses made known in the passage about the bush when he called out, Lord, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living, for to him all are alive. So this is the method that Jesus is employing. Reading the text literally, those words are actually not the words of Jesus. He's actually quoting the words of Moses in front of the burning bush. When he was asking God, oh God, you are the God who made the covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So Jesus is actually literally using the text to answer these guys, telling them, the God who made the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he is not a God of the dead. He is a God of the living. In him is our hope. In him is our happiness. In him we look forward to joining in the company of heaven. And now what is happening later on? The doctrine of the resurrection is based in the covenant that God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this resurrection gives us kind of eschatological hope. Now what is eschatological hope? Eschaton in Greek means the times that are in the future, the coming of the times. In theology, there is a phrase called the coming of God as already and not yet. So God has already come, but it is also not yet. It's called eschatological times. So our belief in resurrection is that Jesus has been risen from the dead, is now happening, but we look forward to the future, living it in the present. The eschatological hope. Our future is already present now. Therefore, we live lives that are transformed. We live lives that are covenant-based, not like the Sadducees. Not asking about whose wife will she be. Asking about the earthly things. Losing their base and foundation, which is supposed to be the resurrection. When we live the covenant, we already make the future present. Like the 7 brothers, right? Even though they were offering their lives, they were already living the covenant that God made with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob. What is the covenant? That I am God of the living, not the God of the dead. In me, your hope should be. In me, your happiness is. In me, the heaven is open. So that is where Jesus is aiming at. So when we truly live the covenant, like the 7 brothers did, like our Coptic Christian brothers did, who offered their lives, when we truly live that covenant, we make the future already present. We make the resurrection already present right now. And that happens with the testimony of my faith. As I live my everyday life, like the 7 Maccabbean brothers, like the Coptic Christian brothers who were martyred by ISIS group, and like the many martyrs of everyday Christendom, everyday Christianity. So this is where Jesus is wanting us to arrive at, and not just get lost in our nitty-gritties, everyday stuff. As Christians, we are people of the covenant that God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it is a covenant of life. Looking forward in hope of the resurrection, that God will raise us up. So as we prepare to apply the landing gear in this liturgical year, are we living our testimony of faith? Are we manifesting that sense of hope, happiness, and looking forward to heaven? Like the Maccabean brothers, who were not frightened, who were courageous to offer their lives, speaking those words of hope, happiness, and heaven, because they were reminded of a God who is living, a God of the covenant, a God who gives them hope, happiness, and heaven. Where is my faith based at? Where is my faith hanging upon? Is it in a God of the covenant? Is it in a living God? Now, like the 7 Maccabean brothers, am I able to radiate the same hope, same happiness, looking towards heaven and being resurrected? That is what we are called to live. Like the brothers, the 7 brothers in the first reading, like our Christian brothers who are being martyred every day in some parts of the world. Dear brothers and sisters, as we prepare to conclude this liturgical year, we are given this invitation to live the testimony of our faith with a strong hope, with unrelenting happiness, and with looking forward to heaven. And examples are given to us by the 7 Maccabean brothers and our brothers and sisters who are giving their lives for their faith and their hope in the resurrection in a God of the living. Hope, happiness, heaven. Amen.